This conference will now be recorded.
All right, folks, so we are in Chapter 14, Special Senses, in particular part of the sensory system. So sensory meaning that we're receiving input, and then the brain, right, and the spinal cord are going to respond to that input in some manner, whether it was via a reflex, right? We talked about reflexes last class, and we talked about how even though the reflexes happen very fast, we're able to then, I need to turn down the volume. As they can happen very quickly, it's not that the brain is involved in it. The brain, after the fact, gets involved after the spinal cord has sent out a quick motor output in order to allow you to what? Withdrawal reflex. You move your hand very quickly from the hot object or this very sharp object, right? So anything that's going to be noxious to you, causing pain, that kind of thing. Or we're looking at, say, like a deep tendon reflex. So with the example of watching the lower leg move as a result of stimulating the ligament for the quadriceps ligament. All right, so let's go into the chapter here and start going with a review. And you'll see here that, again, right from the very beginning, just talking about sensory information and not so much about the special senses until the latter part of the chapter. So you'll see here that a stimulus, right, something that's going to activate, right, the sensory neurons, these sensory receptors, right? Receptors are receiving input, okay? And that input then is going to be sent where? To the nervous system, right? Because those receptors are a part of, right, that nervous system. You'll see here that sensory systems will notify the brain and spinal cord specific changes inside and outside of the body. So whether it's for monitoring what's taking place inside or what's taking place outside of the body, those receptors will send information to the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord. You'll see here that stimulus energy is converted to action potentials. If you recall that last class, we talked about those action potentials, the gradient potentials. That's the bioelectricity, how the nervous system communicates with the rest of the body. So we take from sensory reception to then perception. Perception is what I perceive as far as sense of smell, taste, right, hearing, visual input. That's what's being perceived. This next image here, it's small on your PowerPoint, but I really like this. You'll see here that from sensation to perception, right? You'll have stimulus energy. What can that be? Can it be light? Can it be so visual? Can it be auditory? Can it be olfactory? Any type of sensory stimulus. Those receptors, those sensory receptors, your eyes, your ears, your nose, whatever they may be, right? There's going to be an impulse, this action potential traveling in the nervous system. And then the brain will then determine, depending upon what sensory input is coming into it, right? It'll determine what it needs to do with that. There's a part in the brain called the thalamus. So the thalamus is kind of like, we would say it's the sensory relay center of the brain. It's very deep within. Recall that I showed you the hypothalamus last class there. I showed you that area. It's a very important area. It's like deep within the brain. Well, the thalamus is right in the same area, the same chamber. And this thalamus, other than the sense of smell, right, olfaction, I'll write that down. Your sense of smell, olfaction, that's your sense of smell. Other than that sense, all senses pass through that area there in the thalamus, and then we'll go to specific areas. So for your sense of vision, it's back here. So if you put your hand on the base of your skull, well, the occipital lobe is deep within the brain. That's the lobe, that's the area of the brain that actually receives that sensory input. So think about this for a moment. If you have some type of trauma to the back of your skull, can that affect your ability to see? It very well could. Very well could. It very well could affect maybe not. So because it's not really affecting, if you got hit in the back of the skull, it wouldn't affect the receivers, the eyes, right? And with their special receivers and photoreceptors and such, but it could affect the processing of that visual input. You understand? Because that's where this, we would say that the olfactory, not the olfactory, the visual cortex is in that area right here, the occipital lobe. There we have deeper is the cerebellum for your sense of balance and equilibrium. So pretty amazing that how we have these sensory input, and then the brain will determine what to do with it. Now, I'm not asking you to memorize this information, okay? But I just want to just show it to you as far as seeing that there are different types of receptors present in the human body in order to receive different types of stimuli, okay? That would make sense. So you'll see here, as far as sensory receptor consisting of free nerve endings, sensory organ, sensory receptor involved in nerve endings with an afferent neuron enclosed in a speck. So you see how like this is a different type of a structure? And then how about this? This is an even more different type of a structure. Depending upon whether you're in the skin, in the integumentary system, for those upper two, or on the bottom one, the very lowest receptor there for your special senses, right? Well, each have their individual, purposes, and their structure really helps with that function. This you'll need to know. So whether it's photoreceptors, chemoreceptors, mechanoreceptors, so you've got the word receptor there, right? So it's receiving information, whether it is, so for photo, light input, for chemo, for chemical input, and then for mechano, for some type of actual pressure, position, acceleration, and some type of change that's mechanical type of a change. Here we have also a couple more. So you have here these receptors that you'll have to know what they represent for the quiz, right? So thermo for heat or cold. So some type of temperature, really. So thermo receptor for temperature reception. Nociceptors, this is for your sense of pain, right? So pain input and such. This would be for these pain tissue damage nociceptors. And then for osmoreceptors, as far as actually dealing with, and recall we talked about osmosis. I mentioned to that, right? The movement of water down a concentration gradient from high concentration to low. Well, osmoreceptors change in water volume. So look down below here as far as where it's in purple, where it says sensory adaptation. This is what I was talking about earlier as far as wearing clothes or wearing a hat even, right? So diminishing response to an ongoing stimulus. So the stimulus is continually being there. Even the masks over, like you just kind of get used to wearing them even though it's not the most comfortable thing. Your sensory adaptation occurs with those, and so you don't notice it as much, right? Unless someone, again, brings it out to you and then kind of reminds you of it. But the electrical signals, those nerve impulses, travel along those neurons and go to the central nervous system. Here you're seeing as far as action regarding stimulation of these muscle spindles present within skeletal muscle. Remember, skeletal muscle, if we contract, actually moves the skeleton, moves the bones. So you'll see here that you'll have this input from this muscle spindle. This is that receptor sending information, right? And recall that if we're sending information, we're receiving information, we call it afferent. And if information is leaving, if signals are leaving, we call it efferent. Remember, we said those two terms there? Afferent, A-F-F-E-R-N-T, and then efferent, E-F-F-E-R-N-T, right? Knowing the difference between those two terms is helpful regarding the nervous system, right? And you see here that then information goes to the nervous system, and then information will leave the nervous system and be sent to that skeletal muscle. So the sensations. So you all know the different types of sensations that you can experience and feel and have stimulate your body, right? So you'll see here, receptors for somatic senses. So these are body type. When we hear the term somatic, it refers to the body. So somatic, think body. Okay. You'll see here they're near the body surface and skeletal muscle, in the walls of soft internal organs. Right? The fingertips and the tip of the tongue are the most sensitive. Interesting, right? When I was in chiropractic school, when this is going back many, many years ago, right? So, like over 30 years ago. So we had phone books. Many of you probably have never even used a phone book because you've got your phone. But phone books could be, thin or could be quite thick as far as how many pages are in them. And what we would do is we would practice our sense of sensory perception, because as chiropractors, we palpate, we touch people, right, in order to make corrections and change. We would actually put a hair, right, in a page, and then see how many pages we could put over that hair and still be able to trace the hair and just improve our sensory perception of, right, their sense of touch. So, pretty wild. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Thought I was a Shaolin priest. I love martial arts, man. It's pretty cool. And I really enjoy those movies that have different monks and different people who are dedicated to the martial arts and stuff. Pretty cool stuff. But sometimes, man, you'll see them do some crazy stuff. Seriously, just wild stuff. You have a question?
Sorry, I was trying to remember this one movie, like the one you were just talking about, but I can't remember the name of it. But all I remember is the scene of somebody kicking a sign really hard. I don't know what it is.
But there's some. I know certain martial artists who do things with kicking a lot. I've seen them break baseball bats with their shins. You know how hard a baseball bat is? That's pretty wild stuff in training. So back to the sensory systems here. So now you're going to see something here I'm going to want to point out to you. So signals reach the somatosensory cortex. Okay. So I'm going to get a brain for us here. So give me a moment to go out into the classroom here. Step out for a moment. You don't see it. Oh my God. Awesome. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'll start with you all right here. Okay. So as we're looking at this brain here, the side view, right, of the hemisphere. So sensory area is right where my fingertips are. That's the sensory area. So the input from your body goes to that thalamus, right? Goes to that inner part of your brain. I'll show you that in a moment. And then it goes to this part of the folds, right? So it goes to this part of the folds. And that's where it talks about. So it goes right into those folds right there. And when it says here the somatosensory cortex, that post-central gyrus, so there's a fold that kind of bifurcates and separates the frontal lobe from the parietal lobes. And so really, this area right here, frontal lobe. So this area right here where my hand is up covering, frontal lobe. And so there's this line right here. And you would look at it and go, well, what about the other lines? And you'd be right there. But this is this what's called this central sulcus, this indentation right here. And this is what separates the frontal lobe from the parietal lobe. And so the frontal lobe has to do with the motor ability. So control, conscious control. See the skeletal muscles over there, our lower extremity, our upper extremity, right? Conscious control, that's the frontal lobe. The parietal lobe, which is right over here, like above your ear, that would be more for the sensory input. So when it says here, post-central gyrus, that's that sensory input that's going to be coming to the parietal lobe. Free nerve endings detect stimulus we perceive as pain, itching, and such. So quite interesting, right? How your sense of pain sensations, your sense of itch, right? So, and really know this, that an itch. Have you ever had an itch that was so bad that it was just like consuming? Like you're just like, right? It's just like so bad that you just want to like, you're scratching your skin and it just, yeah. That's why like something like cortisone, right? So hydrocortisone cream can be very helpful to kind of anti-inflammatory, help to mellow that out so it's not so itchy and such. Right? Everybody stand for a moment. So in class here, just stand and stretch it out a little bit, just for a moment. Yeah, it's hard, right? I know. Just ate lunch a little while ago. I'll just chill and listen to Dr. Perrone and start to go out. So we don't want to do that.
I think it's good to have a voice that puts people to sleep and wakes people up.
Yeah.
Have an irritating voice.
Right,
Give
please.
It's a good voice.
I fall asleep. I fall asleep to the sound of cars. I don't think that works.
Oh no, my son listens to like this heavy metal thing, and like don't get me wrong, I enjoyed hard rock but he listens to this heavy metal loud, and he'll try to go to sleep. I'm like, good.
Now, in his defense, there's nothing more soothing than a Swedish guy screaming his lungs out.
Yeah, that screamo stuff. I know what you're talking about. I've heard it.
Swedish death metal is my lullaby.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So, excuse me. So coming up to what this next image here, you'll see is, so this is a cross-section of the integument, the skin, with the supportive tissue as far as the subcutaneous layer, or aka the hypodermis. And what I want to point out to you is that, so we saw this type of, so the Ruffini endings, the free nerve endings, the Pacinian corpuscle, those were examples of receptors that you saw earlier on in the PowerPoint there. They all have their different structure, how they're formed, how they, what they look like, and how they, but how their structure is allows for them to do their job, their function. Okay, so that structure dictates, it determines their function. So you'll see here, as far as showing you that there's light touch for the Meissner's corpuscles, the Merkel's discs for the steady touch, so for like wearing clothes, right? Or just the light touch, or say you brush up against something, or say, how about a bug walks along your skin for like the light touch, as well as the hair follicle receptor. Moving the hairs out of displacement of the hairs, moving the hairs can trigger that stimulation and let you know, hey, something's on your skin, right? Or the Pacinian corpuscle, which is deeper, which would be for deep pressure, vibrations, right? And then the Ruffini endings for pressure and touch, and they're kind of like mid to superficial. Yeah, so all these are a little bit different in their structure, but again, having different functions. Referred pain. This is quite interesting, actually. So pain itself, actually, is study of pain. And so when I spent all my years in practice, there was 80% of my practice, patients were in pain, right? 20%, patients were coming in, 15, 20, for just, getting their adjustments and feeling okay, but just wanting to make sure that things stayed okay, right? But the remaining of my practice, so the majority of my patients were in pain, either acutely or chronically. And dealing with people who are in pain and treating people who are in pain, it's quite a challenge, to be honest, right? You've all had some type of pain, right? What you tell me in classroom, what type of pain? Let's go around the room. Describe a type of pain that you might experience. We'll just go around the room and do this. So how would you describe what that gallbladder pain felt like? Shooting pain. Okay. And like stabbing. That really helps us to understand. Like it wasn't just like a little, no, it was like, yeah. And did you feel it in another area?
I felt it in the middle,
Even though it's more on the lateral aspect of it. Yeah. So interesting, right? So again, too, with gallbladder, you can also experience shoulder pain and have that. And so that's what we talk about as far as this referred pain. What type of pain have you? Okay. And how would you describe it? You have, because doctors will ask you, describe your pain. How would you describe it?
I want to go back to my thumb. So it's like this constant, sharp pain. I thought they were needle poking.
Yeah. Okay. And that's a good, also descriptive. Needles. Yeah. Good.
I think
Oh Lord. I feel bad for you, man. Those are terrible.
it's not fun. I'm sorry. It literally happened within 2 hours after waking up, and I just couldn't go to the bathroom. I tried every position, standing, sitting, everything, and it was just the stomach pain. I had pain back here in my lower back.
I would have patients come in, and they complain of pain, go back to them, and then you check them out and be like, well, this seems to be like an adjustment type of issue for me, but and then time to take yourself a kidney scan for that. I think yeah. So what did you end up doing?
They gave me an IV, and I don't even know if I passed it, but everything's fine. As soon as they gave me the IV, it was like a complete one.
Yeah, that's have you ever had it? I have to tell you this, right? If you had one,
Oh, yeah.
it'll happen again. So keep hydrated.
Oh, yeah.
Seriously, keep hydrated. And especially during summertime, because summertime you get hydrated, you won't. Even when you don't feel like you want to drink, drink. You don't want to have that. What kind of pain?
I was spraying my finger.
Okay.
It was more of like a throbbing kind of.
Yeah.
I couldn't really move it as well.
So did it get swollen?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So that's that throbbing that irritates the nervous structure, the nervous system, as well as blood vessels. Yeah. So, well, fun, right? Yeah. Did you overstretch it somehow, or?
Yeah, I overstretched it.
That way,
Back
game
there.
like that.
Oh, wow. Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so that's basically.
Wow.
Just how first.
Were they having you do a lot of lifting and such, or not? So
Yeah,
much?
I was look at genetic products.
Oh, okay, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So they're heavy.
Yeah, they are.
So that's how what like that.
Yeah. Plus, you don't want to have exacerbate, make it worse.
That's what I have to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're not the first one to change your job as a result of some type of pain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The that's important.
Oh.
You want to start.
Without a doubt. Make it worse.
Exactly.
Cool. All right, table one, that was good. Table two.
I fell out of a treehouse made of doors and smashed my head on one rock we had piled next to the treehouse made of doors.
Okay.
They were renovating the apartments, and we didn't have tools, so somebody thought it was a good idea to use rocks to weigh down doors in the tree. Long story short, I was in the hospital for about, I don't know how long, but I was in the hospital for a while, and my entire head broke whenever I moved around, including my neck area.
Yeah.
Probably because of the rock.
How did you fall?
I was in the tree, I tried to get down, and I am as graceful as a potato.
I would say so. Oh, well, you're here now.
More or less. Between, well, pulling out a lot. Get radiators, push on the stove on the baby, lead poisoning. Yeah, just a lot of bad things happen to the brain.
So pain is the not a good friend.
Well, you know, not dead, so I guess I win.
Well, I mean, I guess like maybe a little bit, like,
Yeah, I think they're hard. It's like you can't rub it. And you feel it.
but other than that, I don't have it.
Okay. Yeah, maybe it's not though. They can prevent you from doing a lot of things.
Yeah.
That does it get real bad?
Oh, yeah, sometimes I think that.
Like scale of 10. So like 1 to 10, 10 being the worst. Okay, that's pretty high actually. Are you getting checked out? You should. Dr. Jerome is telling you to go to this. But you want to make sure. Yeah, please make sure.
I have active sciatic surgery.
Ah, yeah. Which side?
It used to be on my right side, then it like somehow went from the right side over to the left side.
Sciatica stinks. That is just a terrible pain. If you look at our buddy over here, and so the nerve down low here, so this is why you can have it on one side and then go on the other, because if it's a centrally located issue, like impingement of the cord contents down low, that can absolutely affect one side or the other, or both. So you don't want the both. At the same time. On a scale of 1 to 10, what would you put that at? 10 being worse.
It used when I first like happened, it was a 10 all the time.
Yeah,
barely.
good.
Now like right now it's like a 3 or 4. Don't want to hear none of that. But as long as I like keep moving, kind of stretch a little bit, and don't like lay down.
And I'm okay. So like if anybody needs to stand during the class, even when I'm not saying take a break, it's okay to stand. But okay, you're not going to bother me at all. If your back is sore and you can walk around a little bit, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Absolutely. All right, Eric? Last but not least.
I tore my calf muscle.
Oh, now that's a bad one.
Oh, yeah.
Too.
It's I almost
Yeah.
got 1 in 10. I was like 10,000.
Yeah. That's no fun.
Yeah.
Did they put you in a boot?
Yeah, I didn't know it was torn after it happened. I thought it was just already bad. And then I saw my old athletic trainer and I asked him, I was like, hey, I haven't been able to walk the same. He's like, what? He palpated and he's like, yeah, this is a torn.
Yeah. Not good.
No.
How long did it took like 6 to 8 weeks?
12 weeks.
12 weeks, yeah. 6 to 8 for bone, yeah, and soft tissue, the more, so understood.
Even though whenever I like run or play basketball, like as soon as I feel it a little bit, I'm like, I'm done.
Right,
guys.
because if it starts cramping on you like that, it can get tighter and tighter and then re-tear it. You don't want that. All right, thank you guys. Very good. So yeah, so those of you online and watching our class here, so we went around, we talking with the students here in the classroom and discussing pain and discomfort and how really, if you noticed also, like different types of pain and in different locations, in different areas, in different body systems. So yeah, pain really is though a way of the body's getting your attention to prevent you from further causing damage wherever you're experiencing the pain. Because Eric, if you kept on walking, right, you would have further damaged it. So the pain brought your attention to the fact that, hey, dummy, not being dummy, it's like you know what I'm saying, like your brain is like your body's talking like, hey, dummy, what are you doing? Like, why are you still walking on me? I'm telling you it hurts and you shouldn't. That's what I meant. I didn't, that. Yeah. But we understand that, right? That the body will use pain in order to get our attention. So do you recall when I talked about Hansen's disease, leprosy? Remember I told you, and I said to you that. So imagine then if you didn't have pain receptors, if you had issues where you didn't have any receptors that were working right, you saw what those people looked like, unfortunately, right? They really, their faces, their extremities, their hands, their feet, they were a mess. because they don't have that input like you or I would have that. And so really sad illness. So pain, as much as it's really a very tough and difficult thing to deal with, it's a necessary thing for us. It protects us. Now, there was the Nobel the Peace Prize, not the Peace Prize, the Prize for Biology, I believe it was. I'll have to look it up again. I'll tell you next time that I see you all. But it had to do with the study of pain and receptors and such. I'll look that up for you all. But the two gentlemen who were working with different aspects of this, and so this is a big deal because folks, treating pain and being able to help patients with pain, we know what a major issue, right? Because of folks that are dealing with, addiction issues with pain meds and such, and it's just sad stuff. Interesting here again with that referred pain. So we're talking about the gallbladder pain, that could be a referred pain, and you had a referred pain more centrally located, even though it's more lateral as far as where the location would be. So pain is felt in one area of the body that is different from its source. So, yep, wild stuff. We'll go a few more minutes, folks, and then we'll take our break. So here you're looking at and just showing you where different areas of the body, and you know what, you all know as far as for like the left upper extremity and chest, for your sense of issues with the cardiovascular and the heart, right? So if someone's experiencing a myocardial infarction, a heart attack, they might have left-sided neck pain. They might have issues even with the jaw and also with the chest and left-sided upper extremity pain. So that's a referred type pain. But you can see on this chart here that there are other issues also regarding areas of the body. You can have the different organs and such can refer pain to other areas of the body. Let's go back one. So now we're going to move on to your sense of taste and your sense of smell, and really understand that they both work in conjunction with each other to allow for you to have this sensation of taste or gustation. Yeah, so it's kind of a weird term, right? But gustation, your sense of taste, right? Taste buds on your tongue are what receive this information, right? They're receiving chemicals, right? They're receiving these stimulants from the food we eat, the liquids that we drink, right? Whatever enters into the oral cavity, where those taste buds are located on the tongue, right? And also, folks, they're located on the epiglottis, which is I'll show you that a little bit later there. But so there are these receptors, approximately 10,000 taste buds. Okay, so there are quite a few of these receptors there. Knowing that olfactory element, the sense of smell, is important. Have you ever had issues with your sinuses or had a cold or a flu and you really couldn't, you were all congested and clogged up, and then you try to eat something, you're like, this doesn't taste good. Yeah, because really it's affecting, it's kind of messing with your sense of taste because you don't have so much your sense of smell. It's been diminished. Okay? So olfaction, the sense of smell, olfactory receptors. So you'll have taste receptors for your sense of taste, these taste buds. Olfactory receptors located deep within the nasal cavity. Okay? And you'll see here that detect substances dissolved in mucus. Know that for your sense of taste, they have to be these, whatever the tastants, we call them, they have to be present. So like say you eat a chicken sandwich, right? So anything that you just take it into your mouth and chewed has to be broken down and really covered in some type of liquid. So you have saliva and you have mucus in your mouth that does this, and allowing for then those taste receptors, those taste buds, to be stimulated for whatever the taste is that you're experiencing. Okay? And again, your olfactory, your sense of smell, same thing. As far as within the nasal cavity, that's where those they need to be dissolved in a liquid in the mucus in order to stimulate them. So here we have. I don't know why I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and then reshare. Okay, there we go. It wasn't coming up on my screen for my online class. So you'll see here, folks, that we have these different types of papillae. It's a weird kind of a word, right? Papillae. These little projections on the tongue. Now, there are primarily the tongue is covered in. Do you know what a terry cloth looks like? Like a washcloth. You ever look at a washcloth and see the little pieces on the washcloth, right, that can grab onto the soap and help to clean you up good, right? So I think of it like terry cloth when you're thinking of the tongue, that it's covered in many of these little projections. Now, not all of them actually are there for your sense of taste. Okay? Not all of them there for your sense of taste, because your tongue needs to be rough and not smooth. Imagine if your tongue were smooth like this piece of paper, really smooth, right? You took food into your oral cavity, into your mouth, and if your tongue is smooth, is it going to be able to hold on to it so well? No, right? So if it were smooth, I did this as a kid. You get like one of those hard candies, like those really hard, like circular type candies, and you put it in your mouth, and then all of a sudden it goes, whoop, it goes back into your throat. And you're like, ugh! And you're kind of like, yikes! And after a while, it can kind of go down and such, but it's a little scary, right? Because those were like really like smooth, and they just and they're small, and they just, okay, if you want to, send a child to the emergency room, give them some hard candy, thanks. So anyway, smooth is not good in the oral cavity, right? So the tongue is rough. It's rough so that it can hold on to the food, so that you can help to chew it down to smaller pieces in order to be able to swallow it and taste it. So you'll see here that we have these different types of taste receptors present. So this is your tongue. That's the base of your tongue right there. And that piece right there, that's the epiglottis. That's the part, so I'll explain to you the epiglottis. The epiglottis prevents food and liquid from entering into the trachea, into your windpipe, into the respiratory system. So so it's a flap. It's a flap that will open and close and allow for food to pass into just the esophagus, to the digestive system, right, and protect that the respiratory system. We don't want liquid. We don't want food going into the lungs. That could actually create a problem, create an infection, and so that could not be a very positive or good thing whatsoever. So tastants. So that I used that term before there, tastants, right? So each taste category is associated with a particular tastant molecule. So we'll end with the next slide here, but you'll see here that there are different types of tastes. So we can have sweet, sour, salty, right? Bitter, okay? And another one called umami, which you're like, eh? But how about this? Umami is described as like a brothy type of it. So soy sauce, right? So soy sauce would be like a juicy tomato, a steak, having that brothy kind of a flavor and taste to it. Like an Asian cuisine, we have that brothy a lot. So that's umami, right? Now, out of all the tastes, bitter is the most sensitive. So you tell me, why do you think that bitter might be the most sensitive? Say again? There you go. Very good. So the body knows that, in nature, there are bitter things out there that you can pick up and, put in your mouth. And if it's bitter, it's your brain saying, hey, I'm not going to say that. Hey, silly. Hey, silly, don't put that in your mouth. Don't eat that. That could be poisonous. And really, that could be poisonous. That could be a very bad thing. And so, but not all things that are bitter are poisonous, although it all depends upon if you like Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks coffee.
I never say that.
But, you know, like coffee does can be a little bitter, or it can be a lot bitter. You know, all depends upon. Go ahead.
Okay, this is just a side thing. I swear to God, last time I had Starbucks coffee, it tasted like I was drinking Listerine.
Yeah, you know, it has to be your thing. I don't mind it. Yeah, I like them both. I have to be in the mood for one or the other, but you know, I like it both. Whichever. Yeah.
What makes there's a green leafy thing I hate it. In like Mexican food, like
Cilantro?
yes, what makes that taste gross to some people but good to others? Like I think
Yeah,
it's
right.
disgusting.
So now understand this also. Like genetics can play a role in certain things. I don't know about cilantro, but I know that genetics can play a role in how some folks can taste certain things and some folks cannot taste certain things, right? And so that could be a genetic thing. I don't know. I have to look that up to be honest. But yeah, I'm not a fan
Yeah.
myself. That just for me, yeah.
And that's, I hear it's one or the other.
Yeah. Also, how about like in a certain type of Asian cooking that would have curry and other types. So we've had Tracy and I have had friends over the years that we've gone over to their homes and they have Indian type cuisine. And so and just like anything else, like if you're not used to a cuisine, right? If you're not used to the spices that are used, it can be a little different. But I like most of it. I'm just not partial to the curry so much. But you know, and some people just like they love it, right? So you know, you just how you grow up also can be a part of that as far as when as a child. But then there's just some things that like, hey, like even like a flavor like a carrot. So for me, I can't take carrots. I know it's silly, right? But and celery, carrots and celery. Won't eat. If they're really cooked, really good, you know, I'll eat it. But yeah, so interesting how flavors and the different types of tastings and such can have a positive or negative impact in our lives for sure. You'll see here this interesting perceived taste, right? Depends on the nature of the triggering chemical. And so again, that the ability for those tastings to have that bitter, right, to stimulate those bitter receptors, really important in order to act as a protective function for human beings. All right, so let's take a break here now at hearing. Okay, so I'll turn off the. So those of you that are online, I'm going to turn off the camera and the audio for the next. We're going to take a 15-minute break. Okay, so this will be the long break today. Later on, we'll take like a 5 to 10 short break. But right now, we'll do like a 15. So those of you that are online, we'll begin at 3:15. Okay, so I'm just going to turn off the audio and the visual, but we'll come back at 3:15. Thank you. We'll start in just a moment, but let me just go out to the hallway. What's that for? Okay, so we're just going to start in just a moment there. All right, so now we're going back, getting into the sense of hearing. Okay, so this is a special sense of hearing. And so you'll see here that structures in the ear trap and process sound waves. So I'm going to come out into the classroom here, and I'm going to go over and look at our ear model. Okay, so let me come out into the classroom here. And what you're looking at, folks, is that this is a model representing the human ear. And so what do you see here as far as this outer part of the ear, okay, acts as a funnel. It acts as a funnel, so it funnels sound waves into this canal right here, this canal. So the sound waves get funneled, right? So really, when you look at it, we all know what a funnel is, right? You know, what it's shaped. So when you look at the external ear, it does look like a little bit of where it's kind of, like it can be a funnel that you can actually take these sound waves, receive them, send them through this canal, and then they can have interaction with this structure right here called the tympanic membrane, or your eardrum. Okay? And the eardrum has attached to it on this model two of the bones, two tiny bones that are present within the middle ear. The other one is right here, this little stirrup. Right? That's not the proper term for it, but it does look like a stirrup for a horse, right? So we have the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup, or the proper anatomical terms are the malleus, the incus, and the sapiens. Okay? And so that's really important to see that. And then know that that's that middle ear, this area right here. So when you hear someone that has a middle ear infection, that's this area right here where those little ossicles are located. That's where they're actually moving. And they will in turn stimulate and the top piece. Okay. Well, this is the cochlea. So you're only seeing a portion of where I've got my fingers pinching. That's the cochlea. That looks like the snail shell. Okay. That and these structures right here, where your sense of balance and equilibrium, working in conjunction with the cerebellum, right? Very important. So sense of hearing, this structure right here, the cochlea. So let's come back over then to our PowerPoint here and see that. So the structures in the ear trap and process these sound waves. So these sound waves are funneled into down this canal into touching them. These sound waves will touch the eardrum, the tympanic membrane, and then cause change to happen. So we'll move on, but you'll see here, we're going to come back to this. So amplitude, when we're thinking of sound waves, so this would be amplitude, right? The height of this wave. Now, how close the wave is together, right? That would be frequency. So amplitude and it has to do with loudness. So amplitude, loudness, and then how close those sound waves are together, that's frequency. And so you can have high or low pitch with frequency. Okay? So really important, because as we get older, you're going to lose your sense of part of your hearing will be lost or be diminished over time. Does that make sense? Just like any other special sense that you experience, you can have a diminished sense of hearing. And in particular, because of just the structure that's present within the ear, the inner ear, a higher frequency or a higher pitch sounds, that hearing loss takes place first before lower pitch. So let's move on, and you're going to see examples of the amplitude and the frequency. Not just yet, but another minute or so. So you'll see here that these are the bones that are present within the middle ear. Okay, the malleus, the incus, the stapes, or the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup, because that's what they look like to people who are, non-medically trained in healthcare. The oval window. So that actual stirrup on our model is actually up against the round window, the oval window, right? And so as a result of it being right up against that oval window, when those three bones work together and actually move in response to the sound waves that we receive, that helps to push up against that oval window, which will in turn push liquid present within the structures of the inner ear. It's pretty wild. I mean, it's just like, when you think about the sense of hearing and how unique it is, and you know that, like, if you can't hear, how your world would be much different, right? Truly, your world would be a whole lot different. But know that people who have issues with their hearing do not consider themselves disabled. The deaf community does not think of themselves as disabled. So they just think that they communicate on their level and with sign language and lip reading and such. It's remarkable, right, how they can do what they do. Over the years, I had quite a few patients who were hearing impaired and such. And again, it's quite interesting. And so when we talk about the cochlear implants, I gave you that little handout there and just showed you that there. Know that, so there are some of them in the community that don't think that that's right to do. And so you have to be respectful of everybody's, thoughts and beliefs and whatever they have going on. And but yeah, so that's a very real thing. Just wanted to throw that out there and let you know that. So as we come to then, these bones, these ossicles, these tiny bones within the middle ear, malleus, incus, stapes, the stapes covers that oval window. They respond to the sound waves entering into the middle ear, hitting that tympanic membrane, that eardrum, and they cause movement, which will in turn push up against that oval window, which will in turn will push on fluids, which will stimulate sensory receptors in order to allow you to have the sensation of whether it's high-pitched sound, low-pitched sound. Right? Quite remarkable. Here, you'll need to know this, and you will definitely need to know this for the quiz. Okay, so this is an important one. As far as realizing that, you'll see the sections, the external, the middle, and the inner ear. Okay, the structures that are present in those areas of the ear. So the three parts of the ear: the outer, the external; the middle, where those bones are located; and then the inner, where your sensory organs are present in order to have you have the sensation, receive that sensation, and then perceive it once it's transmitted to the brain. Okay? And that would be in the temporal lobe. But you'll see here that in the external ear, its sound energy hits the tympanic membrane, becomes then and sent to the ossicles, those middle ear bones, and it becomes mechanical energy. And then from the mechanical energy, transmits into pushing on the liquid in the inner ear, which will then become an electrochemical change that will take energy that will be formed, and then will actually stimulate the nervous system to help you to not only just receive, but then perceive your sense of hearing. So please, like, copy this. You need to recopy this and know what goes on as far as the pathway of sound for the human body. This is a really good one. I like this image a whole lot because this image really helps you to see exactly what's taking place as far as the also the inner ear and the round. I mentioned to you earlier, I misspoke about the oval, so the round window instead of the oval window. So the oval window and the round window are very important as far as the inner ear is concerned. So you'll see here, outer external ear, middle ear in pink, and then in blue, the inner ear. Again, this is all for your sense of hearing. Okay? So what will happen is that sound waves get funneled in, pass down the canal, hit the tympanic membrane, the eardrum, start then moving. See, those are the bones, those three bones. And by the way, can you have arthritides take place and affect those bones? If they're joints, because those are three bones connected, when a bone comes against a bone, right, a joint, so those joints can be affected and not function like they properly should, thereby affecting your sense of hearing. So middle ear, and then the inner ear here. You'll see that there's the oval window that stirrup, that stapes is pushing up against. There's fluid present in the blue, which will in turn then also, this pressure of pushing on a fluid, it needs to be relieved. So the pressure relief is the round window right here where my finger is. So that's the round window right here. So when there's pressure, you're pushing on the fluid, then there's pressure relieved at that round window. So oval window, round window. And what I want to show you is that closer to the window, the oval window, would be more of your high-pitched sounds. Further down the cochlea, at the distal portion of the cochlea, would be your low-pitched sounds. So the high-pitch region gets used more than the low-pitch. It gets stimulated more. And as such, you lose your sense of high-pitch perception earlier on than you do your low-pitch. Okay? But I think this is a great image to just really help you to get an idea as far as what's going on with your sense of hearing and such. Now, you'll see here that this is talking about amplitude and frequency. So amplitude deals with loudness, right? So however those waves are, if they're real long, then it's going to be more represent a more louder sound, right? From a to a, right? You can hardly perceive that, right? So loud or soft, and you'll see here in the middle that it's the same frequency, right? As far as how close those waves are together, but different loudness, different amplitude. Okay, so this is louder. It's a greater amplitude than what's above. Here you're going to see same loudness, right? Same amplitude, but a different pitch, right? Because you have either closer together or further apart affecting that pitch, whether high pitch or low pitch. And here you're seeing as far as the structures of the inner ear. So you didn't see this before, but you're seeing those semicircular canals and the vestibular area. And this yellow represents the branches of cranial nerve number 8, the vestibulocochlear nerve, or we would call it the easier, simpler, the auditory nerve. Okay, but that's a cranial nerve. That's a nerve that comes directly off of the brain. Directly off of the brain, cranial nerve. Very important. It's cranial nerve number 8. You should know that. Cranial nerve number 8, auditory nerve also known as the vestibulocochlear nerve. And why is it called that very long name? It's called that very long name because the cochlear portion is for your sense of hearing. The vestibular portion, which is right over here, where those semicircular canals and that structure right next to it there, adjacent to it, that's the vestibule. That's involved in your sense of balance and equilibrium, knowing position sense of your body, of your head, in comparison to what's going on with your body. And so know that like signals that are cross signals that your eyes may be telling the brain one thing, but your body is doing another, can arise and give you, like motion sickness. So, right? How many of you have been motion sick? Right? Yeah, me, unfortunately. And it's not a fun thing to deal with motion sickness, but know that these different signals that are coming to the brain. So, in the case of like those amusement park rides where you're in like a VR type of a thing. So if you're on a chair or you're in a machine that kind of moves while you're also watching like a screen that's thinking you're doing something, how can you beat that and not be sick? Well, one is, and so you're not going to enjoy it, I just have to tell you that, but you close your eyes. If you close your eyes, you're only getting input then from whatever the mechanoreceptors and pressure receptors and from the movement, but you're not actually getting visual input. But if you have visual input plus other sensory type input that's really crossed and giving mixed signals and not the same input, then that's where you end up getting motion sick. Go ahead.
Why would that change from being a child to an adult? I used to not have a problem.
Yeah, so many people just over time, as they get older, they're more sensitive to it. You're right. Yeah, it's not and really, like physiologically, is it just a matter of that, the system maybe works better in that? So this is something interesting, right? Because your nervous system is immature as you're young. As you get older, it matures. That's just a theory. Yeah. I know, right? Yeah. Yeah. Getting motion sickness, there's nothing fun about that whatsoever. And again, here you're seeing, I'll provide this to show you, here's that auditory nerve, the branches. So that's the vestibular portion and the cochlear portion. Here's the cochlea, right? Here's the vestibular region, the semicircular canals and this vestibular area there. Very important as far as for your sense of, like I said, balance and equilibrium, cochlea, for your sense of hearing. So you're seeing here, as far as I kind of talked to you about this a bit. So has anybody ever been dizzy? How about like dizzy to the point where it's like not a good thing? You have to like sit and like stop whatever you're doing. It's like, so you mind first, and then I'll please. So describe what it felt like.
It was awful. I started to feel nauseous, and
yes.
I felt really lightheaded. So
yeah.
I was in the shower, so I think it was after I got my first shot, so my body temperature was very high.
Yeah.
And I didn't register that, and the shower water was really hot, so I started to get really lightheaded. So I had to get out and sit down and take a breather and close my eyes a little because my vision started to go.
Oh man, yeah, that's scary, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
So, have you ever been on a playground and you tried cheating at like any sort of game on a playground?
Sure.
This is gonna make sense, I swear to God.
Okay, let's hear it.
So I got caught cheating in the playground on a little game, right? You ever seen one of those big like swirly?
Yes,
like,
I do know what you're talking. Yes, I kind of thought you were going to go to that.
Okay, so well, what happened is that if you cheated at the playground during this time, they would put you on the thing and then spin it as hard as humanly possible until you're either vomiting or you can't stand up.
Oh gosh.
That was pretty much me.
Ay, ay, ay. So apparently you were on that quite a bit. A few times.
Also, after I fell and scratched my head. Like
Oh,
anytime
no.
I stood up too fast for like a month or two afterwards, instant dizziness. Have to sit back.
Yeah. See, so what can occur is that, so look at this right here. So it says to you that there are these otolith organs, okay? There are these little crystals. Have you ever heard of this? Crystals inside your inner ear? These crystals in your inner ear can get displaced, okay? They can get moved. And if they start going into, so let's go back here for a moment. If they start moving in the semicircular canals when you're not moving, that's a bad thing. That gives input to the brain that you're moving when your visual input says, I'm not moving. That kind of like cross signals can create motion sickness, okay? So because there should be movement of fluid, which will then stimulate at the base of these canals. It'll stimulate them when I move my head in this plane, in this plane, in this plane, right? You see how there's these different planes so that these positions of these, and you'll see it in the lab when we go over it in lab, that these canals are in different positions. And I'll actually in lab, I'll show you a couple of videos regarding this. This is quite interesting. But that's the deal. That's what's going on as far as these semicircular canals. There's these little crystals that get dislodged from the sensory organ at the base of those canals. They get dislodged and they start moving in the canals when you're not. So I'm just sitting still, and if I turn to a certain way, it'll trigger that this canal, the movement in the canal with these little crystals, and it'll make you feel terrible. There's something called benign, right? Paroxysmal, right? So vertigo, BPPV, benign positional paroxysmal vertigo, okay? And what that means is that there's no it just kind of comes out of the blue. And really there's a trigger in that. If you turn your head to one side or to the other, can be the trigger that can cause that movement of those crystals, and it can make it just feel like crazy. It's terrible. That's vertigo. Vertigo is that sensation of, if you ever sat up too quickly and got a little dizzy and such, that's kind of like what vertigo is, but vertigo, like in extended periods and such. So terrible stuff. So this otolith organ is very important. So contain receptors attuned to the head's position in space. Right? So like I said to you, whether it's forward, back, rotated, side bending, that can send input to the brain, right? Telling the brain where the head is located in space, so to speak. So you'll see here that fluid is not only in the cochlea, but it's also fluid is present within the vestibule and those semicircular canals. Okay? And really, you'll see here, so it says here this gelatinous membrane in a semicircular canal, the hair cells with their cilia embedded in the membrane, and you'll see the yellow represents the nervous system portion, okay? And so as a result of stimulation of those hair cells, right, then we're having input going to the brain, in particular to the auditory nerve, sending information to the brain saying, hey, the head is tilted to the right, tilted to the left, rotated to the right, flexion, extension, giving the brain input, what's going on. So you'll see here see these little pink little dots, right? Those are those crystals. Those are the crystals, okay? And if they get dislodged, that's when you end up having these issues as far as this vertigo is concerned. You see also, the blue is the gel. So that gel holds on to those otoliths, those little crystals. Okay? And then you have here also then these little hair cells and such that can stimulate, and you see the nerves. See the nerves? Those are then going to be bringing information to that auditory nerve and then eventually to the brain for that perception. So here's some examples of different types of pathology regarding sense of hearing. Okay? So the otitis media, you've probably heard of that. You've probably experienced that. I think most people have. Middle ear infection. That's what that is. Middle ear infection. And children are more susceptible, and I'll share that with you in a little bit. Ringing in the ear, tinnitus, and also deafness. We talked about it a little bit, just briefly, regarding the cochlear implants. Okay? So let's look at as far as tinnitus and why this might be an issue for young ones. All right, so here on the board, you're seeing a child on your reading left and the adult on your reading right. And what you're seeing is that this Eustachian tube, see how it's more almost horizontal for the infant, and then for the adult, there's more of an angle. Well, what happens is that middle ear, let's go back to our PowerPoint. So look at this image right here. So in this image right here, what you're seeing is that we have this middle ear, and oh, look at this. What's this structure right there? That's your Eustachian tube. So this is your Eustachian tube right here. Okay? And that's what helps to equalize the pressure in your middle ear. So know this, that if you go up a mountain, you're driving up a mountain, or you're flying, and you go to higher elevation, what happens to your ears? You hear like popping. What's the popping? It's the opening of this tube, allowing for equalization of pressure in your middle ear. Okay? So this area right here develops pressure. The Eustachian tube opens, and it equalizes the pressure. Now, that tube opens up into your nasal cavity, the posterior aspect, the very deep part of your nasal cavity, and close to parts of the throat. So if you have an infection or bacterium in your throat, they can travel for an infant because the angle is up, it's not much of an angle. So the infection can travel, enter into the middle ear, hence middle ear infection. Okay, so yeah, for more common for children than adults. All right, let's move on. Your sense of vision. Why don't we do this? Everybody stand for a moment. Just everybody stand for a moment. Just stretch it out a little bit.
Which one was a Eustachian tube again that causes?
So any type of infection, so viral, bacterial, right? That can travel in the mucus and in solution, saliva and such, and it can go up through that tube and eventually enter into it.
It's more horizontal.
Where it is for infants and children, yes.
That's why it's easier to pass.
That's why, yep, and that's why it's really is very common for young ones to get middle ear infections. Okay, so as we move on here, okay, so I don't know what that is. So you see here as far as the layers of the eye. So there are 3 layers of the eye. 3 layers of the eye. So we have here the outer, the middle, and the inner areas, or we call them tunics. That's a term that we use in medical terminology, tunic, a layer. That's all it means, a layer. Okay? So the outer layer, I showed you on that model earlier today, right over here, right? I showed you on this model that we have the white of your eye and the clear part, so the sclera and the cornea. The next layer would be the choroid, the blood vessels, and then the most inner portion of the eye would be the retina, containing those photoreceptors. So those are the receptors for your sense of vision. So as we look at this image right here, I can just point out to you structures, right? So I can point out to you that here we would have the cornea, it's clear. Here's the lens, it's also clear. We have here the scleras in white. Then there's another layer deeper in, that's more, we call it the vascular layer, that choroid layer. And then the very inner layer is the retina. You've heard of people having a detached retina, right? So that means that the inner layer of the eye gets separated from the middle layer. And that's not a good thing, because it could damage the photoreceptors. It could lead to blindness, actually. So it's really quite a very, it's a severe type of an issue, and it needs to be addressed, or the patient could go blind. Yeah. You'll see here, as far as the pupil is the black area, that's just a hole created by this pigmented, you see it like greenish color, pigmented iris. That's the muscular iris that will open and close, right? It'll contract and relax in order to open and close to allow for a larger amount of light, more light to come in, or less light to come in. Okay? So if your pupils are dilated, more light's coming in. If your pupils are constricted, right, tiny little constriction, tiny little hole, that's just not a whole lot of light is entering into the eye. And also you're seeing here the optic nerve. This is cranial nerve number 2. So we talked about auditory nerve, cranial nerve number 2, the optic nerve. And you'll see where it says by the optic nerve, it says the blind spot, because in all the areas of the retina, right, in the posterior aspect of the retina, there are these photoreceptors, except for where the optic nerve enters into the eye. So that area there is considered the blind spot, and you can actually, and we'll do this in lab, kind of like find your blind spot where it would be. And what happens is that your brain fills in the areas that, yeah, I know, it's crazy, right? But it actually will fill in the areas of your blind spot so that you see with no blind spots as far as in your field of view, your vision. So focusing light, or we could use the term refraction. Where we're bending light. So we're bending light rays, we're refracting light. So your cornea, your lens, these are all involved in refracting light, bending light, helping it to go onto the specific area within the inner portion of your eye so that you have sharp vision, night vision, your most clearest vision. So we will have, if you have to have corrective lenses and such, they will take into account how your eye is focusing the light. I'll show you regarding whether you're nearsighted or farsighted. Okay, we'll look at that in just a moment. So you'll see here that on this image, so normal vision is right there, right up at the upper left, reading left. And you'll see how the image is focused right onto the posterior aspect, the back of the eye, on the retina. Now, for someone who is myopic, nearsighted, look what happens. It's like the eyeball is too long. The eyeball is too long. Or in the case of hyperopia, or farsightedness, the eyeball is too short. You might want to write that down. It's helpful. So myopia, the eye is too long. Hyperopia, the eye is too short. Now, corrective lenses will help us to be able to focus the light directly to a specific area of the retina so that you'll have clear, sharp vision. But myopia, nearsightedness, the eye is too long. Farsightedness or hyperopia, the eye is too short. So what's this last one here? Yes, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. It's a.
No, don't be sorry.
Oh, have we ever figured out how to treat is eye lens transplants a thing? Like for instance.
So yeah, so lenses, yes, so lenses, so you can have a replacement lens. So those that go through cataract surgery, right? They have their lens replaced.
Sorry, I was just thinking with the terms of myopia and hyperopia. Did I say that right? Hyperopia.
Yeah. So actually, I would tell you that those that have issues with their eyesight, their vision, when they have cataract surgery, they can see much better.
Right, like
because there's also cloudiness that takes place in the lens, in addition to the issues with being able to see.
Sorry, I was just a bit curious about that. Was just thinking of if bifocal glasses or certain types of focal glasses could help with myopia or hyperopia, could the same principles be used when creating artificial lenses for the eye? Yeah. So again, too, it's a matter of that they can replace the lens, they can replace, and they can do issues with work with the cornea, as we saw earlier as far as LASIK. But there's multiple types of surgeries that can be done. Sorry, I was just curious.
No, don't worry about it. Yeah, it's good. So astigmatism is a matter of that there could be an issue with the cornea. Primarily, it's the cornea. Okay, it's misshapen, or it can be the lens that's an issue. So it's either a corneal issue or the lens issue for astigmatism. But again, that's a factor that can also be associated with myopia, hyperopia, nearsighted, farsightedness. And here we go, just to show you that as far as really what's going on, and I didn't mention this before, but that there's a fluid present where the lens is, okay? So from the lens anterior or forward, there's a fluid. It's called aqueous fluid or aqueous humor. In the area here where it's kind of orange, right? In that chamber there, that's called vitreous humor or the vitreous body. It's more gelatinous. So in the anterior, that aqueous humor, it's more like fluid. But in the posterior aspect, it's more like a jelly. And what goes on is that when we have an image reflected, right, refracted through there, it's a liquid, so it's going to change and it'll actually cause the image to be inverted. And then your brain will help to reset that so that you're not looking around like everybody's upside down. Yeah. It's pretty wild, pretty amazing. So you can see that here on this image. And here you're also seeing regarding what's going on as far as for near vision, close vision, and distance vision, as far as what's taking place with the shape of the lens in order to help you either focus on something close or focus on something far away. Okay? So with its close vision, we're allowing the lens to be more, we're not really contracting any musculature to change the shape. But in the case of distance, the muscles, these ciliary muscles contract, pull on the lens, and flatten the lens for distance. Okay? Pretty amazing, pretty remarkable. Yeah, and so really, I mentioned to you all before regarding that the visual cortex is the occipital lobe. Okay, so taking these photoreceptors are receiving this light information, this light that's being refracted, it's being bent onto the retina where those photoreceptors are located. We take that light and we convert it into then the ability to be able to see what we see and perceive it. And so those photoreceptors are really important right here. Eyes contain dense array, a lot of these photoreceptors. So the process of sight. So the retina contains, that inner layer contains those photoreceptors. We have color photoreceptors, and we have for black and white, so to speak. For night vision, we have rods. For color vision, we have cones. Those are the types of photoreceptors. And so those cones also are really in high concentration in the area where the light will be bent, refracted, so that we can actually have very sharp vision. So your cones not only provide color vision, but also sharp vision. So if I'm focusing on this right now, the light from this marker is being refracted, bent into my eye, and in particular to that area, it's called the macula, where there's these high concentration of these photoreceptors, these cones, those color vision photoreceptors, and it allows for you to see this nice and clear. Okay? That's what, but like when you're out at night, right? You're out at night and there's dim light, right? That's when the rods, which are predominantly surrounding where the cones are located, they'll help you with that night vision, that dim light vision, okay? So here we go. You'll see the photoreceptors, and it says rods and cones. That's what we're looking at as far as for dim light, night vision for the rods, cones for your sense of color vision, sharp vision. And then you're seeing that we have these other nervous system cells which will connect to this structure right here, part of the nervous system, that it will allow for sending what the photoreceptors have received, sending it to then cranial nerve number 2, the optic nerve. Okay, so really, light rays hit the cones and the rods, and then the electrical activity travels from those photoreceptors through these cells, and eventually will then be sent to the cranial nerve number 2, the optic nerve. You'll see here as far as disorders are concerned, so color blindness and such, I have some interesting charts that you can look at and just test that for yourself. Does anybody know if they're colorblind at all? Yeah, you know, it's a real thing, absolutely, and I'll show you, like in the lab, not this lab, but the third lab. If you look at that. So I have a lab group B coming in, right? When you come in on Thursday, we're going to be finishing up work, and then we'll go into the third lab, the very last lab, before we have our quiz. Will be then for special senses in the brain. So you'll see here astigmatism, we've talked about that. One or both corneas, and it can also affect the lens. Uneven. Myopia, nearsightedness, we talked about that. Hyperopia, farsightedness, we talked about that. Conjunctivitis, we didn't talk about this. So conjunctivitis, so if you see someone who their eyelids and the white of their eye, the sclera, is all red and inflamed, this is the conjunctiva. So inflammation of the eye's transparent membrane that lines the inside of the eyelids, and it can really, I mean, it could be very uncomfortable sensation dealing with conjunctivitis. Herpes infection of the eye, so this is a viral infection that can actually lead to blindness if not treated, right? So, yeah, so there could be some pretty major infections that can really cause damage to your sense of vision. Look here, and you'll just see as far as whether we're looking close or looking far away, right? Well, no. This has to do with nearsighted or farsighted. So they have issues with focusing close, but they can see clearly far, right? For hyperopia. For myopia, you can see close, but you have difficulty seeing distance. So I'm myopic, right? Myopia. So I'm nearsighted, so when I'm watching TV, I wear my glasses. When I'm driving, I wear my glasses. But when I'm here doing my work, reading, not a problem. I can see very clearly as far as nearsightedness. You know, I'm nearsighted, so that's not an issue. Melanoma, retinoblastoma. So these are different types of issues as far as cancer that can occur in the eye, and you know, UV light exposure can contribute to these issues as far as, so any type of overexposure to UV definitely is not a good thing, right? So, and also know that genetics also can play a role regarding patient susceptibility. Cataracts I talked about. So cataracts, this is the lens issue, right? So replacing the lens, it's cloudy. So it's gonna, and replace it with a healthy lens will really make a difference as far as your ability to see for these older patients. Although, you know, sometimes middle-aged patients can have cataracts and need them replaced immediately, right, as far as the lens is concerned. This term macular degeneration. So I'm going to minimize this for a moment and show you. So this image right here that you're seeing, but that image all the way to the reading right, that there's black surrounding it there. So if you were to have an opportunity to look at the inner portion of the eye, right, as a result of, like, so eye doctors used to do this with just a little handheld instrument, right, an ophthalmoscope. Now we can actually take pictures and look deeper within with better technology and such, and not just that little scope, but more get a big picture. Years ago, we would only have be able to look at sections at a time. Now we can look at the whole posterior aspect of the retina and look at where those photoreceptors are located. Go ahead.
So all, I guess you say, like, it looks like red or like.
Because there's blood vessels there.
Those are blood vessels, okay.
Yeah, so they're blood vessels. And see this bright area right there? That's your blind spot. It's also called the optic disc. And that area is where the optic nerve is entering into the eye. Now, you see where it says here macula? It's kind of like a little bit of like a pinkish reddish area. That's an area of high concentration of the cones. Those ones that allow for color vision as well as very sharp vision. So your eye wants to focus light on that macula region there in order for you to see crisp and clear. Now, let's go back to our PowerPoint. So what are you seeing here at the bottom? It says macular degeneration. So that macula, that area of the retina that has all those cones, it starts to have issues and degenerates, and these cones get destroyed. They're not going to be functioning like they properly should. So part of the retina breaks down and is replaced by scar tissue. That's bad. And so really, like, your central vision. So I look at my phone here, right? And I'm focusing on my phone. See it nice and clear. Or I focus on this box of gloves, right? I can read it very clearly, right? Well, if someone is experiencing macular degeneration, so they're going to have issues where right here, and it can be worse than just this, where it would be like a black spot. No fooling. It would be a black spot in the center portion of their field of vision. So in the case of retinitis pigmentosa, and they're not showing you there, I'm going to show you another image, but retinitis pigmentosa is the opposite. So it affects the rods, and so the peripheral vision, so it's as if I were looking through, so this would be as if I were looking through tube, and I only could see what I could see through the tube, right? So that would be that type of visual defect where I could see centrally, but not peripherally. So retinitis pigmentosa, it's opposite of the macular degeneration where I have like a black dot in my field of view in the center. You understand? So just depending upon what's been damaged as far as those photoreceptors can affect your field of view. Okay? So here, in the case of like glaucoma and also retinitis pigmentosa, very similar type of visual field defect. In the case of diabetes, this is what can happen. You can have patchy issues as far as blind spots. And cataracts, it's just blurry and foggy. None of them you want to experience, seriously, right? It's just your sense of vision is such, I can't imagine. Now, we have a relative of my son-in-law who is blind. He's been blind for like 20 years. And I can't even imagine, you know, just, I've not really had a whole lot of interaction. I've had visually impaired patients, but I've never had a completely blind patient. I'm only visually impaired. And so with this relative now that's in our family, to be able to interact with and work with the challenges of being a blind person, tremendous, tremendous. Really not very difficult. Here you're seeing as far as detached retina, what goes on as far as that it detaches from the inner lining of the eye. And nyctalopia, so dealing with night blindness. Retinitis pigmentosa. So I talked about as far as issues as far as, so you have that central vision, but again, it's like you're looking through a tube. You know, that's what you're doing as far as for that visual field defect. The retinopathy, this is not a good thing as far as diabetes is a horrible illness, and it really destroys the body. And so the vasculature, the blood vessels can have issues and collapse, and the vision for the patient can deteriorate. So actually this patient, actually, as a result of diabetes, became blind. So you can become blind as a result of diabetes. It's terrible. So there are issues as far as we mentioned about the LASIK. Cataract surgery, we mentioned that as far as replacing the lens. Corneal transplant, we talked about that, and also with the LASIK surgery as far as dealing with the cornea to help improve vision. And these are just two other types of laser type and radio wave type treatment in order to help correct vision and such. And I believe that is, yes. So that's the end as far as this chapter is concerned. I'm going to stop recording.